Welcome back to the channel, everybody. This episode, we're talking about concrete. So as you can see behind me, this slab is poured and the framers have started their work. Unfortunately, the big trusses up top have not been hung yet. It's just been really wet and foggy and muddy out here for the last 2.5 weeks. And it looks like the rest of this week's going to be the same way. So with any luck, maybe after this weekend, it'll clear up and we can finally get these trusses hung up. But anyway, that'll be in a different video. So on to this one. So to start off for this foundation, the first thing we really did for the foundation was find a property that was suitable to build a house on. What I mean suitable was we didn't want to have a 20, 30-foot wall on the side of our foundation. A lot of the houses out here in hill country have some really steep grade, and to build a foundation on something like that, you're talking about a lot of cement, a lot of groundwork, or some kind of raised pier system. Some of those foundations cost upwards of $250,000 to do. That is insane amount of money to spend on a foundation for a house. Something like that just wasn't going to work for us. Our budget could not handle a foundation of that size or that kind of cost. So we had to be very selective on what we chose for our property. So the property out here has got a little bit of a grade to it. When we were looking at it, it had a bunch of trees and a lot of brush and stuff like that on it, so you couldn't really get a real good look at it, but you could see enough of it to realize that it wasn't too bad. Now, as we were looking at properties, we were also talking to Help You Build at that point. Brenda Berger at Help You Build mentioned that we should contact a guy by the name of Tommy Flores. Tommy Flores has his own company, Blockhead Construction. He does foundations, driveways, flat work, most things cement. So she mentioned contact him and ask him to come take a look at the property and make sure it was something that was suitable to build a foundation on. So I contacted him. He came out and we looked at it. Me and him both thought that the drop in elevation out here was probably going to be around 5 to maybe 6 feet. We knew it was going to be some drop, but we didn't think it would be that severe. So we bought the property. Fast forward 8 months later, we finally break ground. Tommy was nice enough to come out here and also clear the property for us. That saved us a little bit of money because he's coupling the two jobs together, so I don't have to pay an additional cost for somebody that's just going to come out here and do lot clearing. So big thanks to Tommy for doing that. So after he cleared the property, the form crew came in and they started setting up the forms. The first thing they did was set out the corner markers, and then they started running string lines from one corner to the next. The first string line that went across the front of the house right back here, they ran it from one end to the other, and I thought they got it level. Looking at it, it looked like the string was level, and the end of the house over here in the corner was about 5 or 6 feet. So we thought, all right, good deal. We're right on track with what we thought it was going to be. Well, that string line was not level. They tried to eyeball it, but they knew they were going to be coming out with a laser level eventually. Well, the laser level came out, and that string line started going up and up and up. Eventually hit 8.5 feet at this corner. So right away we knew that our estimate on this foundation was low and we were going to be going over budget. Thankfully, our budget for this house and the amount that we've been approved from the bank has about a $40,000 contingency in it. That contingency came from me doing a lot of the work. The high side of the budget is if I don't do any of the work myself. So about $40,000 worth of wiggle room there. We don't want to use that wiggle room, but it's there in case we need it. Turns out we needed it. So once we figured out that, yeah, this foundation is going to cost a bit more, we decided to go ahead and press on. There's no point turning around now. We got the budget to cover this, so let's move ahead. So once the majority of the form was up, we knew roughly where all the walls were going to be. It was time to get the plumbers out here. So the plumbers come out and they started laying in the main drain lines. Now, they couldn't finish all of their roughing because of the height of the slab out here. If they put in all the drain lines, what was going to happen is you'd have these really tall pieces of PVC sticking up out of the ground out here. And when the fill crew comes in with the bobcat and all the fill material, they run the risk of knocking those pipes out of whack. And some of these pipes have to hit right on a wall, so they need to be exactly where they need to be. So the plumbers instead laid about half of it. They did the low side of the house, which is back that direction there, and then they started working their way back towards the kitchen area. And the kitchen area is where the ground really starts to drop out here. So they came up with a single PVC pipe that they would tie in later after the fill crew had come up quite a bit. So once the plumbers left, the fill and bag crew came back out and they started their work. Now, when it comes to putting together a foundation, I thought I had a pretty good idea of how this worked. I thought, okay, you put up your form walls, put a little fill material inside, and then rebar concrete. And that's not too far off the truth, but there's a little bit more to it than that. Mainly was the bagging. One of the guys that tried to explain it to me, and I thought they were just going to bring out like a sandbag and then build up some interior form walls with that. Really what it is they take these long plastic sheets and they cut them into about a 3x3 square. They take that 3x3 square, they lay it on the ground, a couple guys with shovels throw some dirt on top of it, or throw some fill material on top of it, and then they fold the top of the bag over, put a little bit more fill material on top of it, and that process just keeps on going. And they had a lot of bags to do out here, like an insane amount of bags. So the fill crew got up to about 2.5 feet below finished grade out here. At that point, they stopped and the plumbers came back out and they finished their rough end. And that included the kitchen area, the mudroom off to the side here, and the water heater and the drain for the water heater. Once they were done, the fill crew came back out and they started finishing up their work. These guys moved pretty dang quick. I thought this bag process would slow things down quite a bit, or I thought for sure there's got to be a faster way to do it, but they really moved. They were doing about 5 or 6 of these big square grids a day, so it only took them a few days to do this. Now, while that was going on, me and Tommy Flores had a discussion about the garage floor. The garage sits on the high side of the house over here, so that meant that not only was our garage floor going to be 8.5 feet off the ground, but so was our driveway. And that meant that our driveway apron was going to be very, very long and be kind of expensive to do. So we had the idea, let's drop the garage floor. That sounds like a pretty good idea. And, you know, I didn't want stairs in the house, but it is what it is. So we decided to drop the garage floor about 2.5 feet. Now, this is where we ran into our first problem out here. If you look at the plans, the garage floor on the engineering plan shows just the outline of the garage floor. Whereas my architectural plans for the house that the drafter did shows the wall in the garage. It also shows a 4-inch parking curb. That parking curb is 2.5 feet off the back wall. So the engineering plan for this house does not show that wall. It only shows the edge of that curb. So the bag crew is out here working off of just the engineering plan. So what happened, they go to drop the floor and they only drop it at 17.5 feet. It wasn't until they had about half of that done before myself and Tommy saw something was amiss here. Thankfully, they only had half of it done, so they were able to undo that bag wall and then move it over to the correct location. So then once the garage floor was done, it was time to finish up the bagging out here. Once the bagging was done, then I had a pest control guy come out and do pre-treatment for termites, and then it was time to cover it all. We just covered it in a black plastic sheeting, basically. It's like a 6mm sheet, and it's just to keep moisture from coming up from the ground into your slab. But out here, more importantly, because I have so much fill material out here, we needed that in place to keep the rain from washing out all the fill material. So that would have been a really bad day. So we made sure that this stuff got down and tucked in good. Thankfully, we didn't get a whole lot of rain, and we were able to start rebar shortly thereafter. So once the rebar crew got out here, they went to work. They got a majority of the rebar put in place in a single day. Then it was just finishing up the final little details around the drops, porch headers, that kind of thing. They also had to add in some thicker pieces of rebar here and there where the engineering plan called for. Additionally, they had to go through and tidy everything up and stand the rebar up off the plastic with some bricks. Now, I've worked around guys before that run a pair of wire cutters, like doing barbed wire fence and that kind of thing, and I've seen guys move pretty quick, but the guys doing the rebar out here, the way that they run a wire and a wire cutter was insanely fast. They move so fast doing these ties that it's almost impossible to see exactly what they're doing. So kudos to them for busting their butt, man. They only have one speed, and that's go. So once the rebar work was done, the last thing I needed to do was get my electrician out here. Because we have an island and a bar section that both have outlets in them, we needed electrical run to those two locations. We also have 2 floor sockets ran in the center of the living room to sit on either side of where the couch should be going. So they had to come out and lay that. It's pretty straightforward. They just ran conduit in a couple boxes, stuck it up through the rebar, tied everything in place, called it a day. After the electricians were done, then it was finally time for the pre-pour inspection. Now, my concrete guy was telling me that most engineers come out here looking to find something wrong, and they always find something wrong. So much to our surprise, the engineer that came out and did the inspection didn't find a single thing wrong. The only question he had was about the plastic. Their plans didn't call for the plastic to go all the way down to the bottom of the beams, but we went ahead and run it all the way into the bottom simply because we didn't want to have to worry about the rain washing it out. They had to explain why we did that to them, but it wasn't an issue. So we got the green light from the engineers to go ahead and do the pour. Unfortunately, the day we decided to do our pour on, we got rained out and we had to wait 2 days. Then finally, the day came. So bright and early Thursday morning, it's like 5:30 in the morning, I'm rolling out here. And shortly behind me, here comes the pump truck. Now, I've seen slabs get poured before, and I've seen these trucks, but I've never been on a job site with one of these trucks before, and this thing is huge. And it's quite the engineering marvel to see this thing work. So right behind the pump truck was the cement trucks. The first two were on site within 5 minutes of the pump truck getting here. Problem is that I didn't have any of the cement crew here yet. So thankfully they were right on the heels of the cement trucks and they got to work. So by 6 o'clock in the morning, we were pouring cement. Now, when it came to pouring the cement, I thought that this would be pretty straightforward. I thought, okay, you just start putting cement down in the holes and fill up the form. Well, it's not quite that simple. Because of the height of some of the areas of this slab, they can't just pour the whole thing at once. The weight and pressure of that wet cement will actually blow out the side of the forms. That's something that we just can't afford to have happen out here. That would be a lot of cement, a lot of time, and a lot of money. So to resolve that, what they do is they pour this in layers. Think of it like trying to build a layered cake while you bake it. Essentially what they have to do is they have to run around the exterior walls of the forms and in the interior beams and start laying in layers. And they lay about a foot and a half layer all the way around. By the time they make a full loop around the slab, the layer they poured previously has set up just enough to hold the additional weight of the concrete poured above it. That process just continues until they come all the way up to the top level. As this was going on, we started looking at our yardage. We had originally started with 160 yards of concrete out here, and we hit pretty close to 160, and we had just started doing the finished surface of the foundation out here. So we knew we were going to need more trucks. And we knew this right away, but we didn't exactly know how many. So we needed to get into it to find out for sure how many we needed. So once we hit 160, or got close to it, it was time to call for more trucks. We ended up calling for an additional 45 yards of cement, and that put us to a total of 205 yards. That is a lot of cement. Anyway, so the crew finally got everything poured. Once it had been poured for a little bit, the guys came through with the screed, and all that is just a really long piece of aluminum, and they just trowel out the surface of it to make sure it's nice and flat. There's no big divots, no big humps. Immediately behind that guy is a guy running what they call a jitterbug. Jitterbug's pretty simple. It's just a square tubing frame with some expanded steel welded to the bottom of it. And what he's doing is he's using that thing to tamp down the concrete. What's really going on here is that he's pushing the rock down in the concrete and he's letting the slurry come to the top. That way they can trowel out and get a very, very smooth finish without having to worry about a bunch of rocks poking up. So once they had the whole surface screed and jitterbugged, the guys came through with the big trowels on the ends of these booms. These things were used to do the large area of the surface and did the majority of the slab. Some of the finer areas in the corners along the edges of the forms and around any pipes that were sticking through, they had to do by hand with hand trowels. So once all the hand troweling was done, then it was time to let the surface of the cement set up just a little bit so they could get the power trowels out here. So away they went with these things. They do a full pass of machines, let it sit for about 30 minutes, and then come back over it again. This process continued about 4 or 5 times. So once they did the last pass with these machines, the surface was extremely smooth, and it had like a powdered texture kind of feel to it. It's kind of hard to explain. It just felt like ultra fine felt or something. But it was smooth as glass, and it had a really high sheen to it. You could see the reflection of guys walking around in it. Once that was done, then it was just finishing up the edges here and there. They also had to knock off the headers for the front and rear porches and the inside of the garage. In those areas, they use a sponge to give it a sanded texture and finish out that wall. The rest of the slab is finished dead smooth, and the front and back porches have got a brushed finish to it, so they just come around with a large brush and just drag out the top of it. They give you that textured finish that you typically see on porches. So the next morning, the crew comes back out and they start taking down the forms. Now, as they started taking down the forms, I started seeing what they call honeycombing, and you can see some of that behind me here on the walls. And the finish of the wall is pretty rough. You can see the texture of the forms, honeycombing everywhere. It just doesn't look very good. And so immediately I started thinking, okay, we got a problem here. This doesn't look like a normal foundation, at least not none that I've seen. Come to find out, this is completely normal. All slabs look like this when they come out of forms, at least most of them do anyway. So what happens next is after the house is done, or the majority of the framing is done and the stucco work on the outside of the house is done, it's time to start doing what they call plastering on the side of the slab here. Plastering is pretty straightforward. What you do is you take Portland cement, you mix it with sand, and then you add what's called milk, and it's just an adhesion promoter. You mix that all up, and then you just trowel it on. Try to get it nice and flat and smooth, cover up any of your little bumps and divots and any of the honeycombing. Once it starts to set up, then you just hit it with a sponge, and it gives it that sanded texture like you see on most foundations. Pretty straightforward, and that's something that I'll probably be doing myself, because at this point we're looking to save any bit of money we can, because like I said, the foundation went way, way, way over our original estimate. So time to start pitching pennies here. So that's more work I'll be picking up. So all in all, foundation pour went really well. A couple little hiccups here and there, but that's to be expected, especially being a new builder. The workflow and how things have to happen out here is very, very new to me. So thank God Tommy was there. He was quick to answer phone calls and give me answers and lay out the timeline and how this process all works. So he filled in a lot of the gray areas for me. I cannot recommend him enough. If you're in the San Antonio area and you're looking at doing a foundation or driveway or any kind of cement work, definitely give him a call. You will not be disappointed. I'll leave his contact information below. So thanks for watching, guys. Stay tuned for the next video. That one should be covering the framing of this house and hopefully the erection of these trusses if they ever get put up. Weather is killing us out here. It's been nothing but drizzly and foggy and muddy for 2.5 weeks. So a lot of the big heavy lifting we haven't been able to do, and it's killing me to have these things just sitting out here waiting to go up. So with any luck, that'll happen soon. So again, thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next time.